All right, so welcome to the info session, this kind of introduction to the 4-hour article draft. I will take you through a little bit of the background to this workshop and this offering through CSU Writes, and then a little bit of how it operates, and then some strategies for you to be able to prepare for your writing sessions. I'm Christina Quinn. I'm the director of CSU Writes, and this was something that we came up with a couple summers ago, and we've just been running with it since. So I'm glad you're here and interested in the 4-hour article draft. A little bit about CSU Writes. If you haven't attended CSU Writes offerings in the past, just know that we have different streams of offerings. Sometimes they're very similar, right? So grad writes, doc writes, fac writes, or team writes. We may have very similar workshops in each one of those. And just know that if we're doing a workshop on scheduling for graduate students, it's just slightly different than how it is that we might cover a workshop on scheduling for faculty. But then there are some series and some offerings that include all of those streams that everyone's invited to. And this is one of those where anybody who has an interest in being able to organize and put together an article so that they can write it out and draft it out very quickly, anyone is welcome. And by the proposals as well. We talked about that earlier, but proposals are certainly welcome and part of that process. Anything that you can draft out a manuscript, right? But CSU Writes, we're part of a writing community, and this is just a reminder of our principles of community as we come together. So when you attend sessions with other folks, just know that we ask people, to be open and honest and present, and that the last one in particular, that after our time together, sharing only what is yours to share, is a reminder that, take the information and share that out, but other people's experiences are not for you to share at CSU Writes. And then our time together, we're going to talk about, again, that workshop background, the purpose, and how to prepare for the fall semester in 2024. We are looking at having 2-hour sprints on Tuesday mornings. But if you can't attend those, we'll talk about other options for show up and write and ways that you can structure out your own 2-hour blocked writing sessions. This comes out of a long-standing offering from CSU Writes. The background of CSU Writes is that we work for to support academic and research writers in building their professional development, right, through writing, but also then how to produce in really kind of efficient ways, but also ways that are best for you and your own well-being. And we had come up with, in like 2015, a Write for Speed workshop. It has continued to be one of our most popular workshops, and it's really simply about how do you untangle generative writing, that kind of drafting things out, from editing, where you go through and you look at things critically. And those are two different processes. They are actually two separate areas of your brain, both dealing with language, but it means that if you're trying to generate and draft at the same time that you're trying to look critically and edit, that you're kind of, it's almost a version of multitasking. You're having to shift very quickly between those two portions of your brain, and it can make you quite tired. So Write for Speed helps us kind of untangle that. We just pay attention. We set a timer. We have 5 minutes on of just generating, and then moment to kind of look at what we've got, and then 5 minutes of then editing. So you make a kind of a general mess and kind of throw out everything that and then you kind of go back through and clean it up. It's a version of drafting quickly and editing slowly, which is super helpful. And it just allows for each one of us to have our own experience with writing, because writing is complex, and that, it just allows for us to have varied experiences, even with our own experience of writing. So in 2022, I mentioned that we had done some sort of experimental summer session. And that was, I did a standalone kind of single author manuscript draft. And then I had a colleague from no, that's not true, from Civil and Environmental Engineering, but with a project that had overlapped with CMB folks, bring a team. And both of us, the team and I, looked to see if we could create an article draft in 2 hours. It was super ambitious, and it turns out to be way too ambitious to be able to draft out a full article. But what we did find was that by adding on a subsequent session the next week, that within those 2 2-hour sessions, we could get pretty close to having a full article draft. And so that's what we have run with since. It really is two-hour sessions that equal 4 hours, right, over time. We split them up by a week just because it's really intensive to write in timed sessions for 2 hours. We've done the workshop that way since. Most of our participants say that they produce 1,200 to 1,300 words in their draft, which may be a full manuscript for you, may not be quite where you want to be. It depends, but you can, through our adding on, just an offering so that each week you can attend a 2-hour session. You could prepare, if you're ready to draft, you could write for 2 hours one week, go back and prepare additional materials, draft more the next week, and just continue on through the semester. It might take 4 or 5 writing sessions perhaps for you to get that full draft, but then you would have that draft to then go back and edit. And again, the key is to be using those sessions if you can. If you're looking to draft, draft it out. You can also use the sessions for editing as well, but really we're looking at like creating a draft in these. And we've also presented at conferences on this and gathering, as I mentioned earlier in our group, we're gathering data. So what it looks like is just timed sessions that are broken apart they're deliberately, right? When we probably won't do the early bird start, you can always get to a writing session earlier if you want to, because that gives you about half an hour-ish to be able to get your head in the space. Either way, you just want to be able to be prepared that when the session starts and we start the timer, that you're ready to have your fingers hit the keyboard and start, generating, content and ideas, one sentence after the other. That writing pace, it doesn't have to be super, super fast, right? It has to be just as fast as your mind is comfortable laying out one sentence after the other. We'll talk a little bit more about the strategies of doing that, but really you want to be able to generate at a comfortable pace for about 25 minutes or so. And then we take a break for 5. And you could either switch sections, right? You could say, I've generated content for 25 minutes on this one section. I want to move to another by the next segment. And so you would kind of put a note on where it is that you finished with that first segment, or like you were drafting the introduction, for example, but now you're going to move on to the methods. And so you're going to put a pin in that one and you're going to write just a couple notes. And so you can do that in that 5 minutes. And so it reorients you to move forward with the next one. You can take a body break, kind of move your body around, kind of get your blood flowing again, and then we get back into it. And these are intensive. So you can think about it like high intensity interval training or any other kind of working where you're just focused intensively, you're taking a break, you're kind of recollecting yourself, and then you're moving forward again. And so we do that for 2 hours. To prepare to be able to write like that, it takes a bit of time. So for those writing sessions, if you don't already know where you're submitting, and we're going to talk about this in terms of journal submission, but you could think about it again in terms of proposal generation. So some of these things will already be identified for you, but like where is it that you're submitting? What are the criteria? What's the structure that your document needs to be in? What concepts and things do you need to cover? So a lot of that comes from understanding your audience and understanding to whom you're submitting. So that's why we say, identify those top 5 or kind of, so you can get a sense of like what it is that you're producing with the information that you have, depending on if you're doing a proposal again, versus an article. And then if you aren't clear specifically on the structure that you want to be writing in, your brain will kind of be like, I don't know, and you hem and you haw. And that hemming and that hawing, it winds up being tiring for us. It also winds up being demotivating oftentimes. And it can be a way that we start to build up resistance if we're not clear on what it is that we need to be doing. When we have great clarity, we have great purpose, we get excited about what we're working on, and then we can start moving forward. So I highly recommend, if you're not clear on the structures in which you're going to be putting together, either the proposal or the article or what you're going to be working on in a 2-hour writing block, make sure that you have that structure prepared. And it doesn't mean that you're preparing maybe the whole piece. Maybe you're just preparing part of the manuscript during that 2-hour time period, but you want to be very clear on what it is that you're doing and how it fits in relation to the rest of the piece. You want to have your data analyzed. So whatever it is that you're bringing to bear that you want to talk about, you want to have a sense of that and be clear on it. Again, for a proposal, that's slightly different than if you're writing an article, but you want to be able to make sure that you're clear on what it is that either your findings are or your data is. You just want to have that someplace already done so that you can draft about it. You can write about it. Same with then preparing tables or figures or illustrations. So a lot of the work that we do with our data is visually representing that specific thing that we want. And I'll share that the team of scientists that were writing the article when we did our first experiment, this was one of the places where I know that in revision, they had to go back and do some significant revisions because they realized that some of their data was off or some of their tables were kind of not what they wanted them to be. And so they had to go back and redo some figures and tables and data in order to do the revisions. And that may happen as well, even with the best of drafts and the best of preparation, right? Whatever it is that you're writing, and particularly for a literature review, make sure that you're up to date on what the relevant literature is and what you're going to be bringing in. Identify any key quotations, passages, sections that you want to be able to paraphrase, have all that prepped in advance, because then your mind doesn't have to be thinking like, do I have this? Do I know this? You can just work with what you've got. And then you're less apt to go down rabbit holes of like searching through and get caught up in a database search while you're trying to get your draft written. Identifying the sections and the subsections very clear, like what is it that you're going to be able to work on in that 2-hour writing block, whatever those that will go into each one of those sections, make it sure that you're clear, like what you're bringing forward. And then you can practice. If you are someone who tends to bunch up, and kind of get stuck by both doing generative writing and editing at the same time. If you start to draft and you're like, oh, wait, and then you go back and then you go for, edit, and then you go back and edit a little bit more. You can build endurance just by practicing 5 minutes of generation and then 5 minutes of revision. 5 minutes of generation, 5 minutes of revision. You can do that at the beginning of any writing session where you know that you want to be able to get unstuck and start writing. 5 minutes is a great way for you to just get into it a little bit and then trust and know that you're going to be able to go back and clean it up. And that's just a practice, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, but you could play with it and see, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. We do the 25 minutes of generation and trust that you will go through the revision processes after the workshop sessions, after the sprint sessions that we do for CSU Writes. So some tips for just in general for focused and productive sessions. Just be prepared to write on all the content methods, site findings, analysis before you attend the workshop or your writing session. And this is probably just good for thinking about like, what does it take to prepare for every writing session that you have? If you are clear on what you're doing, are you reading for that session and taking notes and preparing for something that you will write in a couple weeks and you'll generate? That's fine. We count all of that as writing and what builds towards that writing project. So again, avoiding rabbit holes, I mentioned that. Just mark the impulse that you want to go and get additional information on something. Just put it in, brackets in your piece and just say, need more information here or need citations. Mark that impulse and then move forward. That'll keep you much more satisfied in your generative and in your writing process in general. Because when we, again, kind of like the generate, edit, it becomes less satisfying as a writing session. Same thing then with write a little bit, go to, databases, write a little bit, go to databases. That can be just a little exhausting. So do your databases, kind of work through that, then go to the writing, right? And so you can, as you're writing, if you have the impulse, you can just mark it and just keep on writing. During a writing session, and this is one of the more controversial kind of recommendations because it combines with another one that I'll tell you in a moment. But during a writing session, keep those fingers to the keyboard or pen to the page, and the goal is to keep the writing moving forward. And this is an old hack from Many, writers, probably going back to ancient days, but people like Natalie Goldberg talk about it and being able to just keep, generating, so even if you're like, I don't know really what it is that I want to say right now, but I think what I want to write is, you can use these little ways of, I'm not sure this is exactly how I want to put this, but what I want to say is. And if you are a non-native English writer, this can be a great technique to keep things moving forward, because then you can write in your first or second language or whatever's coming to mind. You can write in that language, still have it be kind of, there may be English and then there's, other languages, and then you keep moving forward, and then it kind of gets you back on track. This is the most controversial, however, recommendation, which is avoid the delete button if you're typing, avoid erasing if you're writing with pen and paper. And the reason for that is, if you think about forward motion in drafting versus backward, right? Like in going back over and critiquing, it just is the thing that keeps you moving forward. I will confess, however, that I have never done a timed writing sprint where I have not hit the delete button at least once. It's really, really hard. And I'm a terrible typist. So, and I get ahead of myself. I'm just thinking so quickly. And so I get ahead of my fingers. And so I often wind up having a lot of misspelled words and things. And then I want to hit delete. So it's, if you haven't practiced this and tried to write without hitting the delete button, it's a great experience. Again, that no editing. If you're drafting out, just know that you're drafting in a session. If you're editing, just tell yourself you're editing, but try not to combine both of them. The key is to just be clear with yourself on what it is that you're doing at the start of a 25-minute sprint in that session, so that you can keep yourself focused. Adhering to the timeline and following the workshop lead, that's also just a given, right? You're attending this in order to be able to craft out something within a couple hours. And then adding things that are kind of formatting or other things that are kind of technically structured by your field. Chances are you're going to want to do all of that after a session. That's part of your editing process, more than likely, your citations, your footnotes, or other things. And you can put them together before the workshop too. But likely you'll have a kind of back and forth with your bibliography or your citations. And then just keeping in mind what you need to be a healthy person sitting and writing for an extended period of time. We know that, sitting is the new, smoking, right? That it's can be long-term and for day after day after day, hard on our bodies. So we want to make sure that we take breaks as we need them. I highly recommend the taking the 5-minute breaks. And then just practice maybe non-judgment writing at speed if you can. So that if you start to find yourself, oh, that's not right, or oh, I shouldn't, or who am I, or those kinds of things, just retool and refocus your mind so that you can focus on generating content and just say, yeah, I know this is making me nervous, or I'm not quite clear on this, but I'm going to keep moving forward because that's what I'm doing in this session. And then later, I'm going to go back and revisit this and see what's golden. What am I taking from this, and what am I going to then edit that's going to make it better and more like what it is that I want to be producing. And so that the critical mind is essential to the writing and the work that we do. But if you're judging yourself or you're judging your work as you're producing it, that can be a bit of a back and forth that turns the critical gaze away from the work that you're doing and towards yourself. And that's not healthy. Sometimes your body will tell you first that you are experiencing stress or anxiety, right? That you realize that your heart might be beating a little quickly, or you can't catch your breath, or that you've got a burning in your chest. Whatever the kind of things are, just be aware of how you're feeling in your body as you're moving through these sessions, and then just kind of breathe into it and kind of work towards a kind of non-judging of that as well. Sorry, I have something in my throat. So celebrate that generated draft. If you have a writing session, and even if it's not the ideal one, right? That it's really good, kind of nice to share your writing. We have it at lunch because that's what we used to do, is have lunch at the end of the the drafting sessions, but just share kind of ideas and things that come out of it, or that just you're proud of, and keep a journal, right? You can write those acknowledgments down for, this is what I got done today, and then kind of express gratitude for that. All right, so if you're watching the recording, make sure that you register to access our email updates and kind of progress check-ins on the sprint and rates. If you're also working on the editing phase, just kind of, it's nice to know that too, and be able to connect with others. Please feel free to reach out. We had a conversation earlier. If you need to have a conversation about your writing, either to get you on track to write, or if you're kind of feeling like you're getting off track in your sessions, then feel free to reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. And I look forward to seeing you at the Sprint and Write sessions, which are Tuesdays, 9 to 11. These are at Walnut Building, but they're also virtually. So if you're attending hybrid, you can attend on Zoom. And so just look at the Show Up and Write page on CSU Write's website, or you can email us at CSUWrites@colorado.edu. All right.